Hello everyone. Today we're bringing you a session about a secure authentication for current. Previously, not long ago, we already explained the administrator authentication to you all, which is actually the most basic form of authentication. Including us. If you want to complete this security certification, you first need to pass our management certification. Compared to our previous management certification, our security certification is entirely focused on the security field. When it comes to some of the most fundamental operations in security, then they are no longer included. Basically, all the fundamental security operations have been incorporated into our administrator certification. So moving forward, our security certification is now entirely focused on the security field. Next, let's take a closer look together at our certification. So what exactly does this security certification truly cover in detail? Here, it mainly and extensively focuses on various critical security issues, including robust certificate-based authentication mechanisms, as well as some essential security best practices for our Docker files. It also covers things like access permissions for pods and so on. These include security context as well. Here we've just listed a few examples, but in total our CKA certification encompasses all of these areas. There are a total of 16 questions. Just like our highly regarded CKA certification, both of these comprehensive certifications have exactly 16 questions each. All of these 16 questions are thoroughly tested, so allow me to provide you with a detailed overview of some absolutely crucial key points you will undoubtedly need to pay very close attention to in advance of your examination. Before we start going over the questions, let's first talk about some important notes. First of all, what everyone needs to pay attention to is this. If you've looked at the previous CKA content, you should already be quite familiar with it, right? Actually, this diagram, this PPT, I completely copied it from the CKA one because regardless of which certification it is, since they're all Kubernetes certifications. So actually here, they all have the same issue, which is with our questions. That is, all 16 questions will be tested, all 16 questions are covered. However, they are not exactly 100% the same as the ones in our question bank. So the types of questions are the same as those in the question bank. For example, not long ago, we were using version 1.32. The exams a while back were also based on version 1.32, and our certification training was also based on version 1.32. Now, however, our version has already been updated to 1.33. But the questions themselves haven't changed at all, not even a little bit. All the questions and all the answers remain exactly the same, so you can just keep practicing as usual. If you previously practiced with version 1.32 and now it's updated to 1.33, there are absolutely no changes. So there's no need to worry about it, whether it's the CKA certification or the CKS certification. From version 1.32 to 1.33, there really haven't been any changes at all. The questions are exactly the same, so just keep practicing as usual. Typically, after a few version updates, there will be some changes to the questions. In fact, earlier this year, there was already one round of changes, which was with version 1.32. There was a significant change made at that time. For now, there basically won't be any more changes this year. It's very unlikely. So even though we've updated to version 1.33 here, if you're using the 1.32 environment, you can still practice. There's absolutely no difference. Both 1.32 and 1.33 environments are fine for practice. So everyone, don't worry about which environment you're using. Next, let me emphasize this again. Although it was already stressed in the previous CKA session, in case some of you haven't watched the CKA video, I'll repeat it here. All of our questions, yes, the question types, are exactly the same. However, during the exam, there might be several sets of questions, not just one set, but possibly multiple sets. So what could be different among these sets? Mainly, the parameters might be different. Also, if there are numbers involved, the numbers might be different as well. If there are name type elements, such as the names of various resources or the names of our namespaces, these could all potentially change. So just pay extra attention to this. The overall question type remains the same. It's just the parameters that change, so keep that in mind. When practicing, the most important thing is to master what? Focus on our problem-solving methods. You must master the methods for solving the problems rather than just memorizing the answers by rote. Be sure to grasp the problem-solving methods. Once you've mastered those methods, then you can practice, and once you become proficient, during the actual exam you need to observe carefully. Pay attention to which parameters in the question are different. Remember to make changes accordingly. If they are the same, you can just write them as you usually do. Since there are several sets of question banks, you might get lucky and actually draw one from our question bank. That is definitely possible. This is one of the types in our question bank, and that's entirely possible. So this is what we have here. The first thing to pay attention to, this is our first point to note. As for the second point actually, I've basically already mentioned it just now. Here, everyone should pay extra attention, whether during practice or otherwise. The main focus should still be on the solution method. Always prioritize the solution method. Also, regarding some things to pay attention to during the exam, let me briefly go over them with you in advance, because the way we'll be explaining the questions next is somewhat different from the actual exam. So let's first quickly cover some issues you might encounter during the test. Let me briefly mention them. Just a quick overview. First of all, when you're taking the exam, during the exam, try to, first of all, make sure your internet connection is stable. This is very important because, as we all know, our exam is conducted remotely. No matter where you are in the world, you will be taking the exam remotely. If you happen to be close to the test center, things might be a bit better, but if you're farther away, try to find some ways to speed up your internet connection. Since everyone might be in different countries, there could be various methods for this, so I won't say more about that. Next, make sure to find a place with a good and stable internet connection. Ideally, have both Wi-Fi and a wired connection plugged in just in case. If you experience a long disconnection during the exam, it could result in you being unable to complete the exam. So, it's crucial to ensure your internet connection is stable. Make sure your network is reliable. This is a very important point. Secondly, try to make sure that after you've practiced the question bank thoroughly, it's best to be able to finish all the questions within an hour and a half before taking the exam. If you can complete all the questions in that time, then you're ready to take the exam. Ideally, right, if you're really familiar with the material and can finish in just 1 hour, then there's definitely no problem. You'll definitely be able to pass the exam, even if you encounter some minor errors or issues. As long as you work quickly enough, you'll have extra time to troubleshoot. But if you're slower, well, for example, if you finish right as time is up and you have 1 or 2 errors, you won't have any time left to fix them, right? Those few errors might end up causing you to fail. So here, everyone really needs to pay attention. Make sure you're very proficient, and only after you're very proficient should you schedule your exam. All right, these are some things to keep in mind that I wanted to mention to everyone in advance. All right, next we'll begin our explanation of the question bank. There are a total of 16 questions in the question bank, and we'll be covering them over several days. First, let's take a look at our first question. The first question is about an insecure issue with our Kubernetes and etcd. This particular question asks us to effectively fix this significant security vulnerability. First of all, please pay very close attention to a specific and important point here. In our simulated environment, we need to consider the following aspects and details. This is quite a bit different from CK. In CK, the individual questions are not really related to each other in any significant way. The 16 CK questions are basically 16 distinct and fundamental topics with almost no direct connection or interrelation between them. So you can easily and conveniently restore snapshots or practice repeatedly at any given time, and that's totally and completely fine. But if you are... For CKS, however, there are a few more restrictions because the questions here are somewhat connected. There is some relationship between them. You must start from the first question and proceed in order. If you start with the later questions, it might cause some issues and you won't be able to complete all 16 questions in one go. So here, everyone should practice in sequence, from question 1 to question 16. Basically, that's how it works here. So, relatively speaking, I recommend that everyone attempt this when you have some free time, preferably when you have 2 to 3 hours available to do the practice. If you have even more time, that's even better. These are the points you need to pay attention to. Next, let's officially start by looking at the content of our first question. So what is the first question about? It's about our fixing and addressing the security issues associated with etcd. So first, for this particular question, the initial step is to... This is something that never changes, no matter where you are. In fact, we've mentioned this in both the CKA exam and in practice sessions. It's the same for both the exam and practice. This step is very important. Make sure you don't log into the wrong host. Because for many of the questions that follow, you'll need to log into different hosts. For example, let's take a look at question 2. For question 1, we have this host domain name. Now let's look at the host domain name for question 2. The second one is specified here, right? Our host domain names are different. If you log into the wrong host domain, whether you're practicing or taking the exam, it's as if you didn't do it at all, or you'll encounter all sorts of errors. There could be various errors during the process. Something missing here, something missing there. Actually, it's because you didn't connect to the correct host. If you connect incorrectly, you'll basically get a 0. Connecting to the wrong host almost always means a 0. So what's next? First of all, we need to make sure we've logged into the correct host. Second, let's take a look at the requirements of the question. The question asks us to run the CIS benchmark tool on the cluster created by Coupa ADM, and several issues were found. Multiple problems were discovered. So what are the main issues? Let's take a look. This question is quite long, so let's go to the next page. What exactly is the task? The first step is that we need to fix all the identified issues through configuration and then restart the affected components. And also make sure our new settings take effect. Okay, that's what the question requires. So first, let's fix the issues. After fixing the issues, what comes next? Restart. After fixing the issues, we need to restart. And after restarting, we have to make sure all the settings have taken effect. Once that's done, this task is considered complete. Here, we need to pay attention to a few things regarding the fixes, which include two main points. First, we need to address and fix all the violations that have been identified. 1.2 and 1.1.1.2, these two types. Alright, first and foremost, let's carefully examine the very first item presented here. For this initial item, it is absolutely crucial that we meticulously ensure that the animal's parameter is definitively set to a value of false. Secondly, it is equally important that we proceed to ensure that the position mode parameter should be definitively set to always allow. Of course, at this moment in time, this parameter has not yet been properly set. This is actually the core issue we're currently facing, and we absolutely need to fix it. Here, there's an important point to note. We should try our best to use webhook authentication and authorization. This is a basic requirement. The second point concerns a violation. This violation is about ensuring that our client, the parameter should be set to true. Actually, there are 3 violations in total, and we need to fix all 3 of them. Then, in our simulation environment, for this initialization problem, there is an initialization script. But during the actual exam, this won't be necessary. In our simulation environment, we need to use the Kubernetes etcd.sh script to initialize the environment for this question. So what is this question essentially about? Basically, it's like this. Currently, there are issues in our environment, right? There are 3 problems. So first, we use this script to generate these 3 problems, and then we start solving them. Just focus on fixing the issues. All right, next, let's take a closer look at how to tackle this question. To answer, first, there are 3 problems. Pay attention here. There are 3 in total. 2 are related to Kubernetes, and 1 is related to etcd. Next, let's look at the solution to this question in detail. First, after entering the environment, we use the SSH command to switch to the appropriate user. Once we're in the correct user account, we can proceed to the next steps. Now let's proceed with the setup and configuration. The main objective of this task is to fix the Kubernetes anonymous access vulnerability and the etcd client authentication vulnerability. After that, we need to ensure that our cluster can pass the baseline security check. These are the basic requirements for this task. First of all, according to the instructions, you need to make sure that during the exam, you always follow the requirements and first remotely connect to the corresponding node. After you finish the task, what should you do next? You need to use exit to return to the initial node before moving on to the next question. So, you need to pay attention here. Make sure to take note of this. Also, this particular question is a bit special. The first question involves something specific. It involves some high privilege operations that we need to perform. We need to use commands to switch to the administrator. So, when exiting, you need to use exit twice. Make sure you pay attention to this. The first question is a bit special because it involves high privilege operations, which regular users can't perform. As you can see, we're currently regular users, right? We're regular users now. So when we reach this prompt, what do we need to do? We need to switch users first. So now use the su or sudo command to switch. First switch to the administrator, switch to an admin user. After switching over, next we can proceed to the next step and start working. Carry out the steps for this task as usual. As we mentioned earlier, this task comes with an initialization script. So first, what do we need to do? We need to run the script, execute it first to initialize some of the environment. Initialize the environment. So here we use the sh command followed by our Kubernetes dash etc. Alright, after running this script, you'll need to wait for about 3 minutes or so. So here, after executing it, let's wait a bit. I'll pause here for now. Once the execution is finished, we'll continue. Let's continue after that. In this way, we can see that now there are already some errors appearing in our interface. Here, I executed 2 commands. One is get pod, which checks the status of our basic nodes and pods. Now, there's an error now. This is the result of running the script we just executed. So what do we do after encountering this error? Next, we'll start preparing to fix it. First, we'll divide the process into 2 parts. The first part is to fix the content-related issues. Our first step is to fix that. When fixing, we need to pay attention to this. Where is the configuration file located? It's in the config.iml file under our VR lab directory. So first, let's edit this file. To do that, we add something after VM. After VR lab Kubernetes, add config.iml. Once you're in the file, after opening this file, the first thing we do is, what is the issue mentioned in the question? The main issues that we have mentioned are, first and foremost, right? We currently have a setting established for the animals, right? And then there is also this particular one, a setting related to authentication, both of which have certain problems. So first, let's go in and look for these 2 configurations. Let's find these two settings. First, we can see here on our file, on the second line, this is actually the configuration for our authentication, right? This is the specific content we need to modify. So the first thing is, in this section, the animals part is currently enabled, right? Next, we need to change it to disabled. Here, everyone needs to pay attention. Under our animals section here, there are two enable options here, right? There are two enable settings. Just make sure not to mix them up. There are two enable options. For our animals here, it should be set to false, and the one below webhook should be true. For these two, in our environment, they are actually set the opposite way. They're both set in reverse, so we need to swap their values. Just change the one above to false and the one below to true. Let's go ahead and make those changes. So set the one above to false and the one below to true. All right, that's the first step. We need to update the configuration for these two settings first. Next, there's actually a small issue down below. There's still a minor problem here. You can look for the relevant section below if you wish. It's about the webhook settings. So for this UI hook content, let's scroll down and find the webhook section. Here, I see the webhook is located at where the mode is set to webhook right here. Here we need to change the mode to our webhook. By default, it's set to always allow, which means it's allowed by default. This is actually mentioned in the assignment as well, so you just need to look for the two configurations mentioned in the assignment and find them here. So for this question, there really isn't much to change because there aren't any parameters, right? For this question, the only two things we actually need to fully modify are both related to options, right? They're both about the options. So first, the two above, including our false, right? True, as well as the mode below. Actually, there's basically nothing to change about these two parts. For this question, there really won't be any major changes. But here, what we need to change, what everyone needs to pay attention to here is this. In our file here, in our configuration file, case sensitivity is strictly enforced. Of course, this isn't just about configuration files on Linux systems, all commands, all files, configuration files, and so on, including the contents of files and specific option parameters. We always strictly distinguish between uppercase and lowercase. For the Y in the account above, it should normally be lowercase. Please pay attention and don't get confused here. As for the webhook below, the W here is uppercase, this is uppercase. Next below is the specific external content. Actually, you can see here that it's intentionally set up incorrectly because if you look at the parameters below, it's webhook, right? So if the mode above isn't webhook, there will definitely be a problem here. So what we need to do is to first correct these 3 points, these 3 places. Above, you just need to swap true and false. Below, change the mode to webhook. This is the modification we need to make in the Kubernetes section. After making these changes, let's save it first. This is our first step, the first part. And after making the changes, make sure to save everything consistently. Save your work. You can just save and exit normally. Press ESC, then type .wq to save and quit. Alright, that's the first configuration change. Now for the second configuration as mentioned in the question, right? One of them is this one. It's related to webhook, right? And another one, look, ET webhook is right here. You can see that it's actually mentioned in the question as well. Take a look here. Everyone, make a note of this. In this external section, it primarily and mainly includes this particular part, right? Just now, right? This was indeed the very first modification, correct? The OS for animals, right? The second modification is here. Right? We always allow. So what we have done is we just changed always allow to webhook. This is a very important distinction to make. Well, here we also have this. The second point is about etcd, right? Regarding etcd, we actually need to enter etcd and modify the configuration. Which specific configuration is it? It's mentioned here, right? It's the client cert. Bar OS. Cleaner means after we find this configuration, we just need to modify it. As mentioned clearly in the question, all these points have issues, so after going in, just change them to the corresponding correct values. So here, let's first go into our files. But in the question, what you mainly need to remember is just the paths of our two files. Actually, the question makes it very clear what exactly needs to be changed, right? 1.2 and 1.1 are the two things I just modified. So 2.1.1, yes, 2.1.1. This is 2.1.1. Here, it's about changing this content, but the file itself doesn't tell us, right? So let's go into this part now. The second file, now the first file is our Kubernetes configuration file, which is about the configuration of Kubernetes. The second file, on the other hand, is about our etcd, the configuration related to etcd. So here, let's take a look at the configuration. Mainly, it's in our, under the etc. directory. In the etc. Kubernetes directory, inside the manifest folder, there's the etcd configuration file. The path is a bit long, so just make sure to note down the path. For the first question, it's mainly about remembering these two paths. As for the specific modifications, you don't really need to memorize them. It's fine to just look them up when needed, right? So just keep in mind that in the first file, we need to modify 3 places in total. Basically, just remember to swap true and false, and then below that, change the mode to our hook. Now, for the second point, let's take a look. There are quite a few files, but we only need to change a few things. What are we changing? The question mentions that we're modifying client control OS, right? Change it to. So what should we change it to? The question doesn't specify, right? It really doesn't say what to change it to. So basically, if it's false, we change it to true, right? And if it's true, we change it to false. Here, by default, if there's an error, only the first will throw an error. In this case, we just need to change client cert out to true, and that's it. So this is our second file, and we only need to make a small change inside. Just this one change is enough. Now, let's make the modification here. As for the changes here, actually, these 2 points are pretty simple, relatively straightforward. Just pay attention. In the previous file, webhook W must be capitalized. That's a very important detail. That's basically it for this particular point. Also, it's really important to just make absolutely sure that you do not, under any circumstances, mix up the concept of animals from the previous question or discussion with the entirely separate and distinct webhook part that we are focusing on here. Please do not get those two concepts confused or conflated in any way. Now, with that clarification in mind, let's proceed to take a closer look at this next element or topic. First, let's change this false to accept right here at this spot. Okay, after changing it to accept, what happens next? Actually, after making this change, originally it was false, right? After changing it to accept, the modification will take effect automatically. It will take effect automatically. Next, let's save this file first. So pay extra attention to these 2 files. Actually, there are fewer changes in the second file, right? The first file is the one you need to be careful with. Just make sure you don't change things the wrong way. The first position should be false, the second should be accept, and below that, webhook W should be uppercase. For this first question, we only need to open 2 files and make these changes. There are 4 settings in total. Across the 2 files, we need to change 4 settings. After making these changes, what's next? Next, we start the repair process. So how do we go about fixing it? There's something you need to pay attention to. When we normally fix this, just now we change one configuration file, right? The other one was a file in the etc directory. After modifying these 2 files, if you want the configuration to take effect, what do we need? We need to reload the configuration and restart our These are the 2 points we need to pay attention to. After changing these 2, reload first. It is also through our system control command followed by our demo reload. Reload first. Then restart our Kubernetes. Just restart our service. Alright, restart the service, and after restarting the service, it will reread our configuration files. Both configuration files need to be reread, because just now, actually, we made mistakes in both configurations, which means we made mistakes through that script. After making the changes, as you can see above, there were actually errors, right? Both parts above showed errors. So next, after it restarts, it will reload the configurations we just modified, and then our cluster can return to normal. Well, we need to wait here for a few minutes, just a few minutes. Let's take a quick look at how the recovery is going so far. It's already been a minute. Let's run get node to check the nodes first, shall we? Okay, the node is ready, right? The node is fine now, so let's check the ports. There are quite a few port pages, a lot of them. As for the nodes, since we only have 3 nodes, where are we now? We're currently on node 1, which is the base node. So right now, we're on the base node. We're now logging into the base node. All right, let's take a look here. So actually what's happened here is that we've already switched over using the switch command. Where have we switched to now? Now we've switched to master 01. By default, when we log into the environment, when we log in, it's actually the base node. Then, using a command, we've remotely logged into master 01. Please note, everyone, that we're currently on master 01. At the very beginning, whether it's our practice environment or the exam environment, both are the same. In the default state, we're always on the base node. Then, from the base node, we use SSH to log into the master node. For the first question, it's a bit special because we need to use administrator commands, so we need to switch to administrator privileges before proceeding with the operations. So please pay extra attention to this point. Next, we've waited, well, it's been 2 minutes now, right? Let's take a look at the results and see how it turned out. Compode. The status of node is actually very good. As long as your configuration is correct, like I just changed 4 configurations, as long as your configuration is correct, all 4 nodes can connect normally. As for the pods, since they're starting up, some pods start up a bit slowly. So everyone, please take note of this. If you have too many pods, as you can see here, let's use A to take a look. I'll show you all the content of our nodes here. Let's take a look. There are a lot, right? Really a lot. Anyway, there are dozens here, right? Let's take a look here. What do we need to make sure of? What should the final result be? All of them should be running, and if there are 2, it must be 2-2. If it's 2-1, it actually hasn't finished yet. Let's look further up. 3-3 is fine, right? 2-2 is fine. All right, there are 3 left, so we don't need to worry about them. Yeah, just ignore the remaining 3. These here are normal. These are normal. So this is our current final result. As long as we achieve this, there's no problem. Our result is fine. That's it. Just these 3, and these 3 are not running. The 3 are not running. Yeah, it's the same during the exam, it's the same during the exam. Because these 3 are a bit special, these 3 are special. The one that's being created right now, that's our second question, that's the topic for question 2. This one is already prepared, that's for question 2. And then these 2 ingresses, right? Although we've already done this in the CKA certification, of course, at that time we didn't cover the security part. Here, in CKS, the ingress involves HTTPS security authentication. So as everyone knows, ingress has 2 tasks, and they're one-time tasks. Once they're completed, there's no problem. Here, completion is normal. The remaining ones are in a running state, which is fine. Just make sure that out of these 3, 2 are completed, and 1 is still being created or running, and that's all good. This is our first question. And finally, be sure to remember to exit. Make sure to exit twice. Exit twice. The first time, exit to our regular user, and the second time, exit to our base node. Alright, for the next question, we'll connect from the beta node to the master node to complete it. That's our first question. That's all for today's content. If you need the complete question bank, you can leave a comment below and get the most stable question bank at the best price. That's it for today. Bye, everyone.